The mop handle felt familiar in Reed's hands as he worked his way down Corridor 17. Water sloshed in the bucket, leaving wet trails on the metal floor that would dry before anyone noticed. Just like him, he had been cleaning these lower decks for 3 years now, and most people looked right through him as if he were made of glass. A group of VRYN workers passed by, their scales catching the dim overhead lights. They talked loudly about their shift, about the broken equipment on Level 9, about anything and everything. Not one of them glanced his way. Reed dipped the mop again and kept working. Gateway 7 was home to 50,000 beings from 40 different species. The upper levels gleamed with polish and pride, where diplomats and scientists did important work. Down here in the maintenance sector, things were different. The lights buzzed. The air recyclers hummed too loud. And people like Reed kept everything running while staying invisible. He preferred it that way. Reed had chosen the night shift deliberately. Fewer people meant fewer chances for conversation. Fewer questions about where he came from or why a human was scrubbing floors instead of doing something better. He had been someone once back on Earth. A teacher. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. The storage closet near the air filtration room was next on his route. Reed pushed his cart toward it, keys jangling on his belt. He unlocked the door and reached for the light switch. A small shape huddled in the corner made him freeze. For thin arms wrapped around drawn-up knees. Gray skin that looked almost silver in the shadows. A child, maybe 7 or 8 years old if Reed remembered correctly about Tormund development. The kid's face was buried against his knees, but Reed could see the trembling. "Hey," Reed said quietly. The child's head snapped up. Large black eyes, too big for the small face, stared at him with pure terror. A Tormund boy, definitely young. His clothes were torn at the shoulder, and a dark bruise spread across his left cheek. Reed stayed in the doorway, not moving closer. He had worked with scared kids before. Rushing them never helped. "I'm not going to hurt you," Reed said. He kept his voice level and calm. "Just the janitor. This is my closet to clean." The boy watched him, but said nothing. Reed glanced down the corridor. Empty. He looked back at the kid and made a decision that went against 3 years of staying invisible. He stepped into the closet and sat down on the floor, a few feet away from the boy. His cleaning cart blocked the doorway from view. "You can stay if you want," Reed said. "I'll just sit here for my break." He pulled a protein bar from his pocket, the kind he always kept for the long nights. Reed opened it slowly, broke it in half, and set one piece on the floor between them. Then he ate his half in silence. The boy stared at the food. Minutes passed. Reed didn't push. He just sat there, chewing slowly, looking at nothing in particular. Finally, a thin gray hand reached out and took the protein bar. The boy ate it in tiny bites, never taking his eyes off Reed. "I'm Reed," he said after the food was gone. More silence. Then, barely a whisper, "Kiv." "Nice to meet you, Kiv." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "You're the first person to be nice today." Reed felt something twist in his chest. He knew that feeling, the weight of a day that crushed you until you couldn't stand. He had lived through plenty of those. "Bad day?" Reed asked. Kiv nodded. His 4 hands twisted together nervously. "They threw my slate in the waste recycler. All my work. Gone." "Who did?" "The other students. The Tormund ones." Kiv's voice got smaller. "They call me stupid. Broken. My teachers say I'm slow. My parents are ashamed." Reed had heard variations of this story before, in another life. Different planet, different species, same pain. Kids could be cruel anywhere in the galaxy. "Are you stupid?" Reed asked. Kiv looked shocked by the question. Everyone says." "I didn't ask what everyone says. I asked what you think." The boy's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Reed could see him struggling with the question, like no one had ever asked him to consider his own opinion before. "I think different," Kiv finally said. "Numbers don't line up for me the way they do for other torments. I see them as shapes, patterns. But that's wrong. That's not how math works." Reed remembered a student named Danny who saw letters as colors. The school had called it a disorder. Reed had called it gift. Danny had graduated top of his class once someone actually listened to him. "Different isn't the same as wrong," Reed said. Kiv stared at him like he had spoken an alien language. Voices echoed in the corridor outside. Kiv flinched and curled up smaller. Reed recognized the sharp, clicking sounds of Tormund's speech mixed with the deeper rumbles of VRYNN. There he is, the broken one. 3 Tormund juveniles appeared in the doorway, bigger than Kiv. Behind them stood 2 VRYNN kids, grinning with too many teeth. Hiding in the trash where you belong, one of the Tormunds said. The others laughed. Reed stood up slowly. He positioned himself between Kiv and the doorway. The bullies finally seemed to notice him, but only barely. Just the janitor. Nothing important. Move, human, the lead Tormund said. This doesn't concern you. Reed looked at the boy, then at Kiv huddled behind him. He thought about 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of hiding from everything, including himself. 3 years of watching the world pass by while he mopped floors and tried to forget. His hands tightened into fists. No, Reed said. The word hung in the air like a challenge. The Tormund bully took a step back, surprised. People didn't usually tell him no, especially not janitors. What did you say? The boy demanded. Reed kept his position in front of Kiv. I said no. The closet is being cleaned. Come back later. The lead Tormund's face darkened. His 3 friends moved up beside him, trying to look tough. The VRYNN kids behind them hissed in amusement. We don't take orders from floor scrubbers, one of them said. Reed shrugged. Then don't. But you're not coming in here. They stared at each other for a long moment. Reed knew he looked unremarkable. Average height, average build, graying hair, maintenance uniform that had seen better days. Nothing about him suggested he could back up his words. But he had planted himself in that doorway and didn't move. The bullies muttered among themselves in their clicking language. Finally, the leader spat on the floor near Reed's feet. Keep your broken pet, human. He's not worth our time anyway. They left, their laughter echoing down the corridor. Reed waited until the sounds faded completely. Then he turned back to Kiv, who was still curled up in the corner, shaking. They'll come back, Kiv whispered. They always come back. Probably, Reed agreed. He sat down again, pulling his cart fully into the doorway to block the view. But not tonight. Kiv slowly unfolded himself. Why did you do that? No one ever. Ever what? Stands up for me. Kiv's voice broke on the last word. Not my teachers. Not my parents. No one. Reed thought about a classroom on Earth 6 years ago. A boy named Danny surrounded by classmates who mocked his colored letters. Reed had stood between them too. He had fought the administration, the parents, the whole system. He had won that battle, but he hadn't won the next one. Reed pushed that memory down deep where it lived with all the others. Sometimes people are too busy looking at what they expect to see. They miss what's actually there. Kiv wiped his eyes with 2 of his hands. What do you see? A kid who got beat up and is scared. That's all I need to see. They sat in silence for a while. Reed checked his watch. His shift had 4 more hours. He should get back to work, but something kept him there on that cold floor. Can I ask you something? Kiv said. Sure. What are shapes, math? Reed blinked. What? You said different isn't wrong. I see numbers as shapes. 3-dimensional patterns that connect and fold and make sense together. But Tormund math is all lines and sequences. My teachers say I'm doing it wrong, but it feels right to me. Kiv's 4 hands moved as he talked, forming invisible shapes in the air. Is that crazy? Reed watched those moving hands. He saw intention there, structure. The movements weren't random. Show me, Reed said. What? Show me how you see it. Draw it. Kiv looked around the closet. There was dust on the floor from the maintenance filters. He hesitated, then reached out and began drawing with 1 finger. Lines appeared in the dust, but not simple lines. They curved and crossed and formed something that looked almost like a flower, if flowers were made of mathematical precision. Kiv added more lines, building up layers, and suddenly Reed could see it. The pattern had depth even though it was drawn flat. This is basic addition, Kiv said quietly. 2 plus 3 equals 5. But for me, 2 is this curve, and 3 is this spiral. And when they connect, they make this shape. 5. Reed stared at the drawing. It was beautiful, strange and different, and completely beautiful. Your teachers called this wrong? Reed asked. They said numbers don't work that way. Math is fixed, absolute. My way makes no sense. Does your way get the right answer? Kiv nodded. Always, but slower than other torments. They can calculate in their heads in seconds. I need to see the shapes first. Reed remembered reading about different types of mathematical thinking. Spatial reasoning, pattern recognition. Some of the greatest human mathematicians had thought in pictures and shapes, not numbers and equations. Kiv, I think your teachers are idiots, Reed said. The boy's eyes went wide. You can't say that. Just did. Look, I'm not a torment. I don't know how your species does math, but I know that getting the right answer is what matters. Different paths to the same place doesn't make one path wrong. But I'm slow. So, slow and correct beats fast and wrong every single time. Kiv stared at his dust, drawing like he was seeing it for the first time. No one ever said my way was okay before. Your way is more than okay. It's interesting. Reed stood up, his knees cracking. I need to finish my shift. You staying here? Kiv nodded quickly. If that's allowed. It's allowed. I'll be back this way in a couple hours. Reed paused at the door. You hungry? I can bring you something real to eat, not just protein bars. You do that? Yeah, I would. Reed went back to his cleaning route, but his mind stayed in that closet. He thought about Kiv's shape math and the way the boy's hands had moved with such certainty. He thought about teachers who couldn't see past their own methods. He thought about parents who felt ashamed of a son who just thought differently. Mostly, he thought about how easily he had spotted the gift in that dusty drawing. Because he had done this before. He had been good at this once. When Reed returned 2 hours later with a warm meal from the night shift cafeteria, Kiv was still there. The boy had drawn more patterns in the dust, covering the entire floor with interconnected shapes. What's all this? Reed asked, handing over the food. Multiplication tables, Kiv said. Up to 20. In my way. Reed looked at the floor. The patterns were hypnotic, flowing from one to the next in spirals and curves that somehow made perfect sense. It's amazing, Reed said honestly. Kiv smiled. It was small and fragile, but real. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Reed worked his shifts, cleaned his corridors, and stayed invisible to everyone except Kiv. The boy started waiting in the storage closet every night, always with new drawings in the dust, always with questions Reed didn't know how to answer. Why does the station spin? Kiv asked one night. Artificial gravity, Reed said. The rotation creates centrifugal force that mimics planetary gravity. But the spin pattern is uneven. I can feel it in the walls. Kiv pressed his hands against the metal. There's a wobble. Small, but it's there. Reed had never noticed. He put his own hand on the wall and felt nothing. You sure? I'm always sure about patterns. Reed filed that away in his growing list of things Kiv noticed that no one else did. The boy saw the universe in layers that most beings missed. The bullying hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten worse. Kiv showed up with new bruises every few nights. His clothes were often torn. Once, he arrived with ink splattered all over his face and arms, the permanent kind that took days to wash off. Reed wanted to march up to the school and tell them exactly what he thought of their supervision. But that would draw attention. Attention meant questions. Questions meant his past might surface. So he stayed quiet, helped Kiv clean up, and hated himself a little more each time. My family wants to send me away, Kiv said one night while Reed wrapped a cooling bandage around his bruised arm. Away where? There's a facility for torments who can't function properly. They'll keep me there until I'm old enough to work simple labor. Kiv's voice was flat, like he had already accepted it. My parents say it's for the best. They have 2 other children who are normal. They need to focus on them. Reed's hands stilled on the bandage. When? 2 months. Maybe less. Something cold settled in Reed's stomach. He had heard about those facilities. Different species had different names for them, but they all served the same purpose. A place to put the ones who didn't fit. The ones who embarrassed their families. That's not right, Reed said. It's what I deserve. I can't keep up. I'll never be a real torment. Stop. Reed's voice came out harder than he meant. Don't ever say that. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. But I'm broken. You're different. There's a difference between those words, Kiv. A huge difference. The boy looked at him with those 2 large eyes. Then why does everyone treat me like I'm worthless? Reed didn't have an answer for that. He never had, even back on Earth when students asked him the same question in different words. Why do they hate me? Why don't I fit? Why am I not good enough? Because people fear what they don't understand. Because different feels threatening. Because it's easier to mock than to learn. But none of those answers helped a scared kid. Not everyone, Reed said finally. I don't. You're one person. Sometimes one person is enough. That night, after Kiv had fallen asleep curled up in the corner of the closet, Reed made a decision. He went to the supply room where maintenance kept their old equipment and dug through boxes until he found what he needed. A broken tablet, obsolete by current standards but still functional. A charging cable. Some learning programs that the station had discontinued years ago. He fixed the tablet during his lunch breaks over the next week. Loaded it with geometry programs, spatial reasoning puzzles, pattern recognition games. Everything he could think of that might speak to the way Kiv's mind worked. When he gave it to Kiv, the boy just stared. What is this? Learning tools. Your kind, not theirs. Reed showed him how to navigate the programs. No one can see what you're doing on here. It's private, just for you. Kiv's 4 hands trembled as he took the tablet. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Reed thought about Danny again, the bright kid who saw colors and letters. Reed had fought so hard for him, gotten him proper testing, special accommodations, tutors who understood. Danny had thrived. Then there was Sarah, the quiet girl who couldn't read faces, who missed all the social cues, who got bullied every single day. Reed had tried to help her too. He had called meetings, talked to parents, implemented safety plans. It hadn't been enough. Sarah had stopped coming to school. Her parents pulled her out, said she was too fragile for the real world. The last Reed heard, she was locked in her house, medicated into numbness, her bright mind wasted. He had failed her. He had tried everything, and it hadn't been enough, and that failure had broken something inside him. So he had run, changed his name, left Earth, found the most invisible job he could, and buried himself in it. But Kiv's question hung in the air, demanding an answer. Because someone should, Reed said. And I'm here. Over the following nights, Kiv devoured the programs on the tablet. He solved puzzles faster than Reed thought possible. The geometry games that were meant to take weeks, Kiv finished in days. He didn't just solve them, he found patterns in the solutions that Reed had never noticed. Look at this, Kiv said excitedly, showing Reed a completed level. The answer is 42, but see, the shape it makes is the same as this other puzzle where the answer was 12. They're connected. The programmers built patterns into the structure itself. Reed leaned closer. He couldn't see what Kiv saw, but he believed it was there. You're something special, kid, Reed said. I'm just different. Yeah, special kind of different. Then the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed in the corridors. A calm, automated voice announced over the speakers, navigation error detected. All personnel remain calm. Engineering teams report to stations. Reed and Kiv looked at each other. What does that mean? Kiv asked. Reed listened to the announcement repeat. Navigation errors on a space station were serious. Very serious. I don't know, Reed said. But it's probably nothing. He was wrong. By the next night, the entire station knew something was seriously wrong. The navigation error hadn't been fixed. In fact, it had gotten worse. Gateway 7 was drifting off course by tiny increments every hour, and no one could figure out why. Reed heard the maintenance crews talking about it in worried voices. The station's main AI had run diagnostics 17 times. Every Tormin mathematician on the upper levels was working on the problem. They had 48 hours before the drift became dangerous. 72 hours before they'd have to evacuate. 50,000 people lived on Gateway 7. Evacuating them would be chaos, economic disaster, and some of the more fragile species might not survive the emergency transport. Kiv was already in the storage closet when Reed arrived for his shift. The boy had his tablet out, but he wasn't doing puzzles. He was staring at the blank screen with a strange expression. You okay? Reed asked. The navigation error, Kiv said. Everyone is talking about it at school. The teachers are scared. They're trying to hide it, but I can tell. Yeah, it's bad. The Tormin mathematicians can't fix it. Apparently not. They can't even find what's causing it. Reed sat down next to Kiv. but they'll figure out. They're the best in the galaxy at this stuff. Kid was quiet for a long moment. His hands twisted together in that nervous way he had. Can I see the error data? What? The navigation data. The error patterns. Can I look at them? Reed frowned. Kiv, that's way above your level. These are adult Tormans with decades of training who can't solve it. I know, but can I just see it? Please. There was something in the boy's voice. A certainty that Reed had learned to recognize. When Kiv was sure about something, he was usually right. I don't have access to that kind of data, Reed said. I'm just a janitor. But it's public. The station posts updates on the main displays. I've been watching them between classes. Kiv pulled up a screen on his tablet. See? They show the drift calculations. But they only show them as numbers and graphs. Reed looked at the data. It meant nothing to him. Just columns of figures and line graphs trending in bad directions. What do you see? Reed asked. Kiv's four hands started moving, tracing invisible shapes in the air. It's not random. Everyone thinks it's random, but it's not. There's a spiral, a three-dimensional spiral pattern in the errors. It's beautiful. Beautiful. The math is beautiful. Complex, but elegant, like a flower opening. Kiv's eyes were distant, seeing something no one else could. It's not a malfunction. It's a mathematical cascade. One small error that's growing along a specific geometric path. Reed's heart started beating faster. You can see where it started? Maybe. I need to map it out. All of it. In my way. Kiv looked up at Reed with those huge eyes. I need space to draw. Real space. Not just dust on a floor. Reed thought fast. The lower decks had maintenance bays that were rarely used at night. Large, empty floors where they used to store cargo before the station expanded. He had the access codes. Come on, Reed said, standing up. He led Kiv through the corridors to Maintenance Bay 7. It was huge, empty, and most importantly, private. The floor was smooth metal, perfect for drawing. Will this work? Reed asked. Kiv looked around the space, his expression odd. Yes. Reed found markers in the supply cabinet. Old thick ones meant for labeling cargo containers. He handed them to Kiv. Show me what you see. Kiv knelt on the floor and started drawing. Lines appeared, then curves, then spirals that connected and folded in ways that made Reed's head hurt. Kiv worked fast, all four hands moving at once, creating a pattern that spread across the floor like a living thing. Hours passed. Reed brought food and water. Kiv barely noticed. He was lost in the math, in the shapes, in the pattern only he could see. The drawing grew to cover half the bay floor. It looked like abstract art, beautiful and incomprehensible. But Kiv kept nodding to himself, kept adding lines, kept building something that made sense in his unique mind. Finally, Kiv sat back. His hands were stained with marker ink. His eyes were exhausted but bright. There, he said, pointing to a specific spot in a massive pattern. That's where it started. A quantum fluctuation in the core navigation matrix. It created this error, and the error is propagating along this path. His finger traced a spiral through the drawing. In 37 hours, it will reach critical mass. The station won't just drift. It'll spin out of control. Reed stared at the drawing. You're sure? I'm always sure about patterns. Kiv, if you're right, you need to tell someone. The station authorities. The mathematicians. The boy's expression closed down immediately. He pulled his knees to his chest. They won't listen to me. I'm the stupid one, remember? The broken one who can't do real math. This is real math. Just because it looks different doesn't mean it's not real. They'll laugh at me. They always laugh. Reed knew that fear. He had seen it in dozens of students over the years. The terror of being mocked, of putting yourself out there and being crushed. It was easier to stay quiet, stay small, stay safe. But 50,000 lives were at stake. I'll go with you, Reed said. We'll tell them together. You're a janitor. They won't listen to you either. Probably not. But we still have to try. Reed held out his hand. Because what if you're right? What if this is the answer and we stay quiet? Can you live with that? Kiv stared at Reed's hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. I am scared, Kiv whispered. Me too, Reed admitted. But we're doing it anyway. They left the maintenance bay and headed for the lifts that would take them to the upper levels. to the administrative offices, to the people who had never noticed either of them before. Reed felt himself becoming visible for the first time in 3 years, and it terrified him. The administrative level looked like a different world. Clean white walls, soft lighting, carpeted floors. Reed's maintenance uniform felt like a costume here, something wrong and out of place. People in expensive clothes hurried past, talking in urgent voices about evacuation procedures and disaster protocols. No one looked at Reed or Kiv. They were ghosts walking through a world that didn't acknowledge they existed. The reception desk sat empty. Everyone was too busy to bother with visitors. Reed walked right past it, following the signs toward the director's office. His heart hammered in his chest, but he kept moving. "Sir, you can't go back there," a voice called out. Reed turned. A young VRYNN in a station security uniform stood behind them, hand on his weapon, but not drawing it. "We need to see the director," Reed said. "About the navigation problem." The guard's expression shifted to something between pity and amusement. "The director is in emergency meetings with the chief engineers and the mathematics council. He doesn't have time for civilians." "This civilian might have the solution," Reed said, putting a hand on Kiv's shoulder. The guard looked at Kiv. His eyes went to the bruises on the boy's face, the ink-stained hands, the torn clothes. A broken Tormin child and a janitor. The guard's expression said everything about what he thought of their chances. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but the smartest Tormins in the sector are working on this. Whatever you think you know, they've already considered it. They're thinking in straight lines," Kiv said quietly. "The problem is three-dimensional." The guard blinked. "What?" Before Kiv could answer, a door opened down the hall. A group of Tormins emerged, arguing in their clicking language. They looked exhausted and frustrated. One of them, an older male with silver markings on his skin, noticed Reed and Kiv. "What is this?" the Tormin asked in common language. "Who lets civilians into the administrative wing?" "I was just escorting them out, Professor Len," the guard said quickly. Professor Len. Reed recognized the name. One of the station's lead scientists. The one who had been quoted in the news feeds as saying the navigation problem was unprecedented. "We have information about the navigation error," Reed said before they could be dismissed. Len's expression hardened. "Do you have engineering credentials? Mathematics training? Any relevant expertise whatsoever?" "No," Reed admitted. "But he does." He pushed Kiv forward gently. The other Tormins saw Kiv, and their reactions were immediate. Disgust. Pity. One of them actually laughed. "That's the defective one from the lower school," a female Tormin said. "The one who can't calculate basic sequences." Len studied Kiv with cold eyes. "You're wasting our time. We have 30 hours before this station becomes uninhabitable. Take your charity case and leave." They turned to go back into their meeting room. Reed felt Kiv shrinking beside him, curling inward like he always did when people mocked him. Something in Reed snapped. All the years of hiding, all the guilt, all the times he had stayed silent when he should have spoken up. It all crystallized into one sharp moment of clarity. "You're wrong," Reed said loudly. The Tormund stopped, turned, stared. "Excuse me," Len said. "You're wrong. About him. About the problem. About everything." Reed's voice carried down the hallway. Other people stopped to watch. "You're so busy thinking you're the smartest beings in the galaxy that you can't see what's right in front of you. How dare you?" One of the other Torments hissed. "I dare because I'm looking at a group of so-called geniuses who can't solve a problem that a child figured out in 3 hours." Reed pointed at Kiv. "He sees patterns you can't even imagine. He found the source of your navigation error. He can show you where it started and how to fix it. But you won't even listen because he doesn't think like you do." "The boy is mentally deficient," Len said coldly. "His own teachers have documented it extensively." "His teachers are idiots," Reed shot back. "They're teaching him to think in straight lines when his mind works in 3 dimensions. That's not deficiency. That's a different kind of genius." The hallway had gone silent. A crowd was gathering now, watching the janitor argue with the mathematics council. Len's expression was stone. "You expect me to believe that this child, who cannot pass basic examinations, has solved what my entire team cannot. I expect you to look at his work before 50,000 people die, because you were too proud to consider you might be wrong. The words hung in the air like a weapon. Len is jou tightened. Fine. Show me. Reed looked at Kiv. The boy was shaking, terrified, but he nodded. It's a maintenance base 7, Kiv said, his voice barely above a whisper. The pattern. I drew it out. All of it. Len gestured sharply. Take us there. Now. They rode the lifts down in tense silence. The Mathematics Council, the security guards, Reed and Kiv, all packed into the metal box together. Reed could feel the hostility radiating from the torments. They thought this was a waste of time. They were humoring the crazy janitor and his broken student before going back to their real work. The maintenance bay doors opened. Len stepped out first, then stopped dead. The pattern covered the floor in a massive spiral of lines and curves and geometric shapes that seemed to shift and flow even though they were drawn in permanent marker. It was mathematical chaos that somehow formed perfect order. Len walked forward slowly, his eyes tracking the lines. The other Torments followed, spreading out across the bay. Their expressions changed from mockery to confusion to something that looked like awe. One of them started then stopped. This is the error cascade, but visualized geometrically. I've never seen mathematics rendered this way. It's wrong methodology, another argued, but his voice was uncertain. Len knelt down next to a particular section of the pattern. His four hands traced the lines without touching them. This is the origin point, a quantum fluctuation in the core matrix. That's what I said, Kiv whispered. Len looked up at the boy with new eyes. The Mathematics Council spent 2 hours analyzing Kiv's floor pattern. They brought in portable computers, took photographs, argued in rapid torment, while Kiv explained his three-dimensional thinking. Reed stood back and watched, staying invisible again, letting Kiv have the spotlight. The boy was terrified but steady. Every time one of the council members challenged his logic, Kiv walked them through his reasoning. His four hands traced the patterns in the air, showing them how the shapes connected, how the spiral formed, how the error propagated through three-dimensional space instead of linear calculations. Finally, Professor Len stood up. His expression was complicated, mixed with frustration and something that might have been respect. The child is correct, Len announced. His methodology is unorthodox to the point of seeming impossible, but the mathematics are sound. He's found the source. The other council members murmured agreement. One of them, the female who had called Kiv defective earlier, looked ashamed. Can we fix it? The station director asked. He had arrived 20 minutes ago with a full security detail. Yes, Len said. With the source identified, we can implement a correction algorithm. The boy has even provided the framework for it, though he may not realize that's what this section represents. Len pointed to a part of the pattern that looked like a flower folding in on itself. How long? The director demanded. 6 hours. Maybe 8. Do it. The council rushed off to implement the solution. The director approached Kiv, who immediately shrank back. Reed stepped forward, putting himself between them. Easy, the director said, holding up his hands. I'm not going to hurt him. I want to thank him. Reed relaxed slightly, but didn't move. The director knelt down to Kiv's level. You saved 50,000 lives today, child. That's not something we can easily repay. Kiv looked at his feet. I just did math. You did math that no one else could do. That makes you extraordinary. The director glanced at Reed. Both of you. The janitor who believed in a student everyone else had given up on, and the student who saw what the experts missed. The next days were chaos. The navigation correction worked. Gateway 7 stabilized. News feeds across the sector picked up the story of the broken Torment child who saved an entire station. Kiv became famous overnight. His family suddenly appeared, claiming they had always known he was special, that they had been supporting his unique gifts all along. Kiv's father gave interviews about how proud he was. Kiv's mother wore her best clothes and smiled for cameras. Kiv stopped coming to the storage closet. Reed told himself it was good. The boy needed to be with his family, needed to accept the recognition and opportunities flooding in. Universities were offering scholarships. Research institutions wanted to study his three-dimensional mathematics. He had a future now, but Reed missed him. 2 weeks after the crisis, Professor Len found Reed mopping a corridor on the lower decks. "I've been looking for you," Lynn said. "Just doing my job," Reed replied, not looking up. "I know who you are. Reed Dalton. You were a special education teacher on Earth. Highly regarded until you disappeared 6 years ago." Reed's hands tightened on the mop handle. "That's not my life anymore. Why did you leave?" "Not your business. You had a student, Sarah Chun, brilliant child with social processing difficulties. She was being bullied. You tried to help, but her parents pulled her out of school. Last I heard, she's institutionalized, medicated, wasting away." Reed's jaw clenched. "Get to your point. You blame yourself. You ran because you couldn't save one child, so you hid from saving any others." Lynn's voice was matter of fact, not cruel. "But you saved 50,000 people 2 weeks ago. And more importantly, you saved Kiv. You gave him the confidence to trust his own mind. He would have figured it out eventually." "No, he wouldn't have. I've read his school records. He was 3 months away from being institutionalized himself, locked away in a facility where his gifts would never have been recognized." Lynn Bauset. "You couldn't save Sarah Chun, but you saved Kiv. Doesn't that mean something?" Reed finally looked up. "Why are you here?" "Kiv is being offered a position at the Galactic Science Academy. Full scholarship, private tutors, the best education available." Lynn met Reed's eyes. "He's refusing it." "What? Why?" "Because they won't let him bring his teacher." Reed's heart skipped. "I'm not his teacher. I'm a janitor. You're the only person who ever believed in him. He won't go without you." Lynn pulled out a tablet and handed it to Reed. "The Academy is willing to offer you a position, teaching students who think differently. The ones other teachers give up on. The ones who don't fit standard education models." Reed stared at the tablet. It showed an official offer letter with his name on it. "I can't," Reed said. "Why not?" "Because I failed before. I'll fail again." "You'll definitely fail if you don't try." Lynn turned to leave, then stopped. "Sarah Chun is still alive, still in that facility. But Kiv gets to live his life, to use his gifts, to matter. You couldn't save everyone, Reed. No one can, but you can save some. Isn't that enough?" Lynn walked away, leaving Reed alone in the corridor with the tablet in his hands. That night, Reed found Kiv waiting in the storage closet like old times. "Your family is looking for you," Reed said. "They're not my family. They're people who share my genetics." Kiv looked up at him. "You're more family than they ever were." Reed sat down on the floor next to him. "The Academy offer is incredible. You have to take it. Only if you come with me." "Kiv, I'm not qualified to teach at that level." "You're qualified to teach me. That's all that matters." Kiv's 4 hands twisted together. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when no one else did. I need that. I need you." Reed thought about Sarah Chun in her facility. He thought about Danny, who had succeeded. He thought about all the students over the years, the ones he had helped and the ones he hadn't been able to save. He thought about 3 years of hiding from his own guilt. "Okay," Reed said quietly. "We'll go together." Kiv smiled, huge and genuine. "Really? Really? But I have one condition." "What?" "We bring other kids like you. The ones everyone else overlooks. The ones who think different, learn different, see different. We make sure they're seen." "All the invisible ones," Kiv said. "Yeah, all of them." They sat in the storage closet for a while longer, teacher and student, both finally visible to each other and to the world. Outside, the station spun through space on its corrected course, saved by the ones no one had noticed until they mattered most.